Welcome back to the podcast. So I'm pretty excited today. Back in September of 2025, 8 a.m., which is formerly known as AffiniPay, which is the holding company of MyCase, CasePeer, DocketWise, and LawPay, held an in-person user conference in Austin, Texas, which is where they're headquartered. And I was invited to be a panelist on 3 different sessions that were held in the 2.5-day event. Today, I'm so excited that 8 a.m. was gracious enough to send me the video from each session. And today's podcast episode is a replay of one of those sessions. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to your Profitable Law Firm podcast. I'm Kelley Brubaker, your dedicated host, passionate about empowering law firm owners. Let's dive into the hidden strategies that lead to overflowing profits, scaled growth, and thriving lives. And this is where overwhelm transforms into confidence, enabling you to create and enjoy your dream firm and your dream life.
Welcome, everybody. Super excited to have you all here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is data. And we are going to be talking about the data-driven law firm and how you can leverage your data to really drive growth. For those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm Gabriela Cubeiro. I'm SVP of Product here at 8 a.m. And I'm joined by really some awesome panelists on this topic in particular. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, I am Kelley Brubaker. I am the oddball in most of the sessions because I'm a CPA, but I'm a fractional CFO for law firms. And so my accounting firm, we do some bookkeeping and in addition to fractional CFO services. My firm is called Profit, Scale, Thrive. The idea being we help firms with overflowing profits, scaled growth, and thriving lives.
Hi, I'm Travis Easton. I'm one of the co-managing partners of Easton and Easton. We're based out of Orange County, California. So my dad started our firm over 30 years ago. 3 sons have taken it over. So I run it with my 2 brothers now. And yeah, we do personal injury, and that's all we do. And then we've also started an AI demand writing company for other personal injury law firms that's called AI Demand Pro. And so these days I'm running that as well. And so I'm traveling to a lot of these conferences and speaking and things like that. So,
well, thank you all for being here. And we're going to jump right in by kind of orienting us around our topic, which is when we say a data-driven firm, what does that actually mean? Like, it's a kind of a buzzword right now. It's in all our content as well. So, Kelley, how would you define that?
So I look at it, I know, like, I'm a CPA, I love numbers, but even I will be intimidated. I will pull a report and it's just number. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And my mind like freaks out. So for me, a data-driven firm is taking the information that you have available to you, actual things. I frequently say, I love numbers because numbers don't lie. Although I've had to recently kind of add a little asterisk to that. Valid numbers. So if you're not doing your bookkeeping like current, then you have crap. So bad, what is it? Garbage in, garbage out. So as long as you have good data to begin with. But what I like to do is instead of just handing somebody a report, I try to turn it into graphs or into a story. If it's something I can't turn into a graph, it's, let me tell you the story of what this number is telling me or what these numbers are telling me. But data-driven is just your actual results and then what you can do to make decisions based on that information.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Travis, curious, as a firm owner, would you define that in a similar way, or what does that mean to you?
yeah, no, I mean, I think that, the data tells the story, right? And it's interesting because, like I said, my dad started, his firm in the early 90s, and he was a sole proprietor. Just him, 1 secretary. Business came in if it came in, and if it didn't come in, it didn't come in. And there was no marketing, there was no data. And luckily he survived on good word of mouth, referrals, and he made it for 15 years that way until my brother that's right above me came along and started doing the marketing game, looking more at the numbers. And so it's been really cool to see our firm's evolutionary process over these last 30 years, going from a one-man shop to now we have 12 attorneys, and we are very focused on the data, down to how many demands did we write this month? How many demands did we give to the attorneys? How many demands actually went out? Settlements, average settlement values, all of those things that really tell us the picture of, are we growing? Are we bringing in the revenue that we need to survive? And it really is become very important to us. And so I think, even if you are a one-man shop, you can definitely focus on the data. And if you're big, it's even more important.
So, Kelley, with you working with so many different firms, different sizes, what is the biggest myth or maybe misunderstanding that you see among small, medium-sized firm owners around data?
So definitely the smaller the firm, there's the presumption that I don't have time or the need to review my data. And I don't agree with that. I have a lot of firms that will come to me because they have a bookkeeper because they have to. They don't have time to do the bookkeeping. And so I'm like, okay, that's great. And then they have their tax person, but the tax person is like, don't talk to me about numbers. I just it's data entry into your tax return. I'm filing the return. That's all I'm doing. So between the bookkeeper and the tax preparer, neither of them can really answer questions. And there's always these lingering, I don't care if you're small or big, but you always have these questions like, is this good enough? Do I have enough cash? When can I hire somebody? And so firms will come to me and say, can you answer these questions? And then that's where my role as a fractional CFO comes in, because now I'm there to be able to bridge that gap between the data and answering the questions.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that we've seen, or I certainly have seen talking to many attorneys, is that there's a sense of pride in the work that you do. And it's also very hard to come to conferences like this and say, am I doing well? I don't actually know if I'm doing well, right? Like, Travis, does that sound familiar to you?
For sure. I mean, it's, you don't know. And and I echo everything that she said. And I just think about, going back to when our firm was started and, there was no data points. And I'm going to throw my dad under the bus for a second, but
we won't tell
he's
him.
He's probably the best attorney of all four of us by far, but he's a terrible businessman, right? And he didn't know how to run a business. And I feel like that is one of the problems often with lawyers is we think of ourselves as lawyers first and foremost and not businessmen, right? And so if you're the partner or the owner of the firm, it needs to be run like a business, And so, we've seen this, at least down in Southern California where I live, these firms are bringing in CFOs, CEOs, VP of operations, any title you can think of in a normal business organization. These mid to big firms have those spots filled now. And I think that, where we sometimes, struggle if you're in the middle to lower end as far as size is, oh, I'm just a lawyer. Like the cases will just come in somehow. I'll work them up. And I don't know what my average settlement amount is. I don't know how many I'm settling. I'll look at the end of the year and hopefully I made a profit. And I think that that's just a recipe for no growth and not very good success.
I agree with all that.
So what are some of the must-track metrics, Kelley, that really you see correlated with firm growth and profitability?
So I feel is almost a trick question. Oh, can I give the lawyer answer?
You sure can. You sure can.
No, it actually does. My answer, so when somebody asks me that, I come back with two questions. What practice, what is your practice focus? Because that matters. Because PI, if I have a conversation with PI firm versus family law, completely different, or immigration, like each practice area is completely different. And then size, where are you now and where are you trying to get? I have some firms that are just solo and they're like, I just want to add a paralegal would be great. If I could just get that, I can maintain that and that'd be wonderful. And that's my perfect life. And I will tell you, I've had my firm for 20 years. I was single, childless, and life was great. And I built this great practice and then got married and had kids. And I was like, whoa, I can't deal with this insanity. And I scaled back my firm. So for a long time in the middle there, it was just me. And then slowly it was like I added on a VA and you had to keep. So really it comes down to, what's your practice area? So for PI, I would focus more on your leads coming in, qualified leads,
Yep.
Because if you're getting criminal, who cares?
Doesn't
Right.
help.
But then for estates, do you have your pipeline, but are you on track with completing, so if you have a rogue somebody you're trying to work on a will or something, and all of a sudden they come up with some crazy thing, and you start off with, oh, this should take 5 hours, and now you're 20 hours in, you're like, oh. So it does depend on what your practice area is, what your size is, and where you want to go.
So from a personal injury perspective, Travis, since that's the world you know, what are some of the metrics that you guys track in your firm?
Yeah. So leads, first and foremost, qualified leads, ROI on those leads. So that would be kind of, some of the numbers that we really track in as far as marketing and the cases we're bringing in, how much, how many of those are we signing up? What's the conversion rate? How long is it taking to settle those cases? And then from like the attorney standpoint, the ones that we really focus on would be, like I said, how many demands are being generated by our demand writers and now our AI software? How many demands are being, actually sent out by our attorneys? That was a new one that we did recently because, we would give our attorneys, a good, our demand writers were doing it or whatever and getting them to them. And then we'd have an attorney with 20 demands sitting on their desk, and for whatever reason. And those aren't going out. And that's just, revenue just sitting there. And it's, potentially creating a problem with the client. So those are a couple. Then we would, how many cases are each attorney settling? What's the average, settlement value for each attorney? What's the average settlement value per case for the firm as a whole? And so, this has been an evolutionary process over the last 8 to 10 years for our firm where we've really, we didn't just all compile this list 10 years ago and say, okay, this is what we're going to focus on. We started with a couple and then those helped. And then you started, you'd have another, stopgap or another bottleneck in your process. And you're like, okay, so how do we fix that? And then, we'd add a data point. Okay, this is how we're going to track that. And then you stay on top of it. And so, if you're staying on it every month, every quarter, whatever you decide to do, it works much better because you can be responsive to fixing those gaps, those problems at your firm, rather than waiting till the end of the year and going to your associate attorneys and saying, well, you only brought in X amount of dollars. What's going on? What's your issue?
Yeah, there's a saying, right, that you can't improve what you don't measure. So we're going to jump ahead actually, because what you were saying made me think, Kelley, how can firms, like obviously we have a lot of different practice areas and even a lot of probably general firms here that handle a lot of different practice types. How can firms go about assessing what metrics are right for them? Like where should they start?
I mean, to start right off, I will tell you, I would want to know, and I'll say this and then I'll explain what it is, but your break-even point. And when I ask somebody their break-even point, for me, that's not only, so break-even is how much money do you need just to keep the lights on in your firm? But I actually look at it from a holistic perspective. I want to know how much money do you need to keep the lights on in the firm and at home. So, I will commonly go through with clients and say, I know, like they'll ask me about pricing and I'm like, oh, okay, there's going to be market pressure, but I need to make sure that what you want to work, how many hours you want to work. I don't want you working 3,000 hours a year and it's not feasible as a firm owner. I mean, you will, but not billable. But let's work backwards. How much money do you need at home? And so first I want to make sure that you just know how much money I need, whether that's $2,000, whether it's $10,000. And I'm not judging. I don't care. I don't care what your lifestyle is. I don't care how fancy or not fancy your office is. I just want you to know what that number is.
When you ask people that question, how often do people know that off the top of your head? Or do you need to help them figure it out? Never. Yeah. So if you're sitting here thinking, I'm not sure, you're not alone. Yeah.
Definitely not alone.
And then what kind of things after that are you looking at or helping them look at in their practice to sort of evaluate? Again, you can't start with 100 metrics. Like, how do they know what's most important?
So I'll end up having a conversation with a client. What are your goals? Some of my clients are like, I just need status quo. I just need to make sure there's money in the bank so that I can pay my bills. And awesome. If that's what you want, let's make that happen. So again, you've got to know your break even. You've got to know. And at that point, then I'm going back to starting with the marketing. That's day one. You got to figure out how many leads are coming in and then kind of dissecting, just because a lead comes in, Is it a good lead? Is it really an ideal client?
Yeah. So you're looking at pipeline, like
Absolutely.
making
So
sure if
pipeline,
they've got a certain growth goal, revenue goal, making
absolutely.
sure that what's coming in the door is enough to fuel that.
Absolutely. Because some clients will say, well, I kind of know a general idea. I need $10,000 a month in revenue. Great. But I'm also looking at it and saying, you probably know how much you're billing, especially if you're an hourly, you know how much you're billing. But then I'm going to say, how much are you collecting? Because just because you billed 10 grand this month, how long is it going to take you to collect that? So like, I'm looking at it like from beginning to end. But then I also look at things like, if you know that you're consistently getting 10 leads a week, do you know how many of those are ideal clients? How many are you kicking away because they're not your ideal client? And for your ideal clients, how many do you close, and how much is, your average revenue off of one client? Because you kind of got to work backwards that way to make sure that you have enough leads coming in that you'll eventually sign up to get the revenue in the door.
Love that. So speaking of data, I'll send this one over to you, Travis. So how would you differentiate between a vanity metric, I'm sending this one to the PI lawyer, and a performance driving metric?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, if it's not driving growth, if it's not helping you evaluate your business, your law firm, and make changes, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing that we're all, that we're trying to get across is, a law firm is whatever you want to call it, a living organism, right? Like, we have adapted and changed so much over the last 10 to 15 years at our firm, as far as the data that we're looking at, as well as the changes, right? The people we've hired to fill gaps where, things were getting missed. And so I think that, as you look at the metrics, if it's not helping your business grow or change or get better, it's a vanity metric.
Yeah. Ones that come to mind that maybe don't always fit in this category, but as you were talking, I was thinking about was like number of employees, right? How many of you talk to other firms like, oh, they already have 20 people. What are they all doing? Or even revenue, if there's not profit, right? Like,
yeah, definitely.
people
Revenue
love
is
to
vanity.
pound chest on revenue, but maybe they're not a well-run operation.
Well, yeah. And so like not legal specific, but just to like nail the revenue is definitely vanity. Uber. So Uber's been around for years. They went public in 2019, and their revenue is in the multiple billions with a B, had no profit until I think 2 years ago. So billions of dollars of revenue and still had a loss. And I actually see this often. Somebody will come to me and say, hey, I finally hit $1 million. I'm like, awesome. I'm excited for you because I really am. But I'm like, how much money is left in the bank? What was your actual profit? And they're like, well, I had to pay off all this debt, so there's no cash left. And I'm like, okay, well, let's fix that. Yeah. Maybe $1 million's too much for you right now. Let's scale it back a little bit. And because I'd rather see the net profit, because that's money in the bank.
Yeah. So speaking of data, how many of you feel like you have a really good grasp on data in your law firm, with a show of hands, or in your accounting firm? We have two hands. Okay. Well, you guys, three. All right. You guys came to the right place. And maybe you guys need to talk to Kelley afterwards. Okay, I'll ask this question in a different way. So sometimes it can just feel overwhelming not knowing where to start, right? Many of you are probably here because you're using one of our solutions. Maybe you do have a lot of data in there, but you're actually not really sure how to leverage it. So how can firms avoid sort of this trap of analysis paralysis? Travis, kind of curious from your perspective, just because I have a little bit more insight into your firm.
I think that personally, start with, pick out 3 to 4 data points that you aren't currently tracking and that you think would be the most beneficial for you in evaluating your practice, determining, where, first decide, where do we want to get to? Like Kelley has said a bunch of times, right? Like, what's the goal here? Are we trying to grow? Are we trying to keep more net, profit at the end of the year? What are we trying to do? Then kind of look at the numbers you have in front of you and focus on, okay, what are 3 to 4 relatively easy numbers that I can track with my staff that would, make a difference, and do that for a quarter and see what happens. I'll just be honest. We started 10 years ago or so. We started tracking number of demands that were written every month, settlements, and new cases. Those were the three. That was all we focused on. And it got us to another level up, right? To be honest. But then we've added more, and a couple of years go by and you add
You probably have like a 100-page report every month.
Yeah. Now you add a couple more, and then you add a couple more, right? But we for sure, none of the partners, we don't have financial backgrounds, right? So it's like, we have help in that regard, but it's like, we try to keep it simple. I'm always keep it simple, stupid, like the KISS method, right? Like, we're all about the KISS method and just, things that, and so we have our attorneys, our associates report every month. The kind of our office manager sends out an email. Hey, I need to know, from all the different staff members, I need to know how many cases we signed up, how many demands were given by demand writers to the attorneys, how many demands actually went out. And then we have our settlement breakdown sheet that shows all of our metrics as far as settlements that month and who did what, et cetera. And so all the partners, we review that, look at it, and, is there any changes we need to be made? Do we need to talk to any of the associates? Do we need to, plug a hole here or there? And that's kind of how we do. That's how I would recommend starting.
Yeah. So Kelley, what are some of the signs that firms might be focusing on the wrong metrics? Like maybe you've come into a firm that's already gotten started. And what are you seeing as somebody stepping into these firms with fresh eyes?
So usually most firms I talk to have a revenue goal, top line revenue. And like I said, with Uber, revenue means nothing. Okay. So that's usually the first thing that I'm like, can we just talk about, like, it's great that you have a revenue goal that's getting you somewhere, right? But let's talk about real impact. And so then the conversation is trying to drift them towards some type of a metric that's, cash in the bank. I'm like, can we at least have this much money in the bank account every month, or never dip below this number? Or can we make sure that you have an account that has money for tax? Because, oh, good Lord, to go from a W-2 job into owning a firm, and then you get that first tax bill and you're like, oh my God, what just happened to me?
It's terrible.
I see a lot of nodding happening.
I'm
in the
so sad.
audience.
I've worked on so many payment plans with the IRS. It's crazy. But I mean, I can give a great example of this. I had a firm years ago. Now this was a firm, I was a fractional CFO for them, but they actually had extra office space and I needed an office to meet with clients. So I actually sublet an office space. So I was there full time because if I wasn't working for them, I was just working anyways on my other stuff. And they had their marketing team come in, and my office was outside the conference room. So I just happened to be there, and they had the door open and I'm listening, and they had this whole conversation, and I'm like, oh, I got to insert myself in it. I know I don't do anything with your marketing, and the marketing people sound amazing. And they were, they actually celebrated me after I walked out because the whole conversation revolved around the firm committed like 20 grand into LinkedIn ads for brand awareness. And I'm like, 20 grand's a big chunk of change. And the firm had it. So that wasn't like, I wasn't questioning. I was all for the marketing, right? My problem with it was that there was no lead capture. They literally, their whole goal was they just wanted somebody that as they scrolled through their wall on LinkedIn, they would look at the firm name and be like, oh, I know that firm. Okay. And it was a firm that did a lot of different things. They had grown over time. They had about 8 attorneys on staff, and each of them had their own little silo of business that they did, which is fine. But I'm like, you're spending a lot of money and you're getting nothing. So I took over the marketing presentation, and I'm asking the marketing guys, well, can we at least capture emails, or can we get likes, and somehow from the likes get, send DMs out to people? And they're like, yeah, that'd be amazing. And the 3 partners, they were like, absolutely not.
A CTA. I know this isn't a marketing
Yeah.
presentation, but a CTA is always a good idea.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, we got to a point where I'm like, and this was actually the start. I don't work with this firm anymore. That was like the start of the end of our relationship, because they were just going in this not direction, really, in my opinion. And I was like, I want you guys to go that better direction. But yeah, it was just so off I'm like, to them, the Vanity metric was, I'm spending 20 grand on LinkedIn ads. And I'm like, well, great, but 0 or negative ROI, because you got to pay the marketing company, right? So it's negative. So yeah, it's a little crazy with the Vanity metrics. And like me sitting here sharing that story, I will tell you, I had a post that went viral on LinkedIn back in the spring, I think. I'm like messaging my friends, like all my business BFFs. I'm like, oh my God, it hit 100,000. Oh my God. Like I get caught up in it too. Trust me. And then a week later, I'm like, oh, that was total vanity. I'm over it.
So how frequently, Travis, should firms be sitting down and looking at this data? And you actually touched on something like maybe you have staff involved, like who's actually joining you in these data reviews?
And she might have better insight into this, but we do it monthly. Yeah. So, we get monthly reports. Like I said, so we have a staff member, our office manager will send out an email to all the related parties that need to report. And we just do it on a group email. So that to be honest, we kind of do it that way. So there's a little bit of peer pressure.
Yeah, transparency.
Everybody can kind of see what everybody's doing, and you don't want to be the one associate.
A leaderboard. I like it. Who
that's
knew?
falling behind and stuff. So there is a reason for that we do it that way. But yeah, like I said, we're capturing that data, right? Demands, new signups, all of those things. We're measuring it compared to last year. We're comparing it month over month and seeing if there's any issues. And then we probably have a quarterly meeting to every 6 months where we sit down with the staff, we sit down with the attorneys, and we, hey, what's going on? Like, how can we help you? Like, what is there a position we could fill? Is there something? Is there a bottleneck somewhere? And then we look at it, and we look at, does it make sense? And if it does, then we go try to find that person.
And as a follow-up, and I'll kick it back to you, Kelley. How involved are your team, or how do you communicate these goals to the staff and to the other attorneys? Are they part of the process in figuring out what those goals are? Do they have a stick, on their computer with their goal? Like, what is that process like?
I mean, not the entire, I'll be honest, not the entire staff, but we have so my two sisters work at the firm. One is the office manager, one's our head demand writer. And then, my uncle works there. So, we have a lot of related family as well.
Easton
which is
times
cool.
Affinity.
Yeah, exactly. Easton squared, or whatever you want to say, but, cubed. But they, yeah. And so, but we have kind of our lead attorneys, right? But we listen to everybody. If someone has something, obviously, but we have kind of our core group of, let's say, 10 to 15 people that we're constantly chatting. We go to lunch every week with all of our attorneys. We bounce cases off each other, but we also talk about, is there anything that's fallen through the cracks, right? Is there anything, how can we improve this? We made this change. Is it working, right? Or do we need to modify that a little bit? And, and how can we fix it?
So, Kelley, same questions for you. Well, what do you recommend firms do when it comes to this?
So I've had some people go from nothing to like 1,000 miles an hour and want to look at everything every day. Way too much. If somebody really needs to look at the information, okay, weekly, but my rhythm is monthly. I like there's just a natural rhythm, but part of it is because I'm an accountant, so I got to close the books every month. So that's just a normal process. But if you think about a lot of the reports you get from any system, and I'm not talking just, bookkeeping systems, a lot of them will preset to a month time segment or whatever. So yeah, monthly is a good, and I love that you include other staff. That's something that I will commonly ask my firm owners. I'm not saying that you have to share all of your dashboard, but share the key numbers with the people who are literally day to day impacting that number. So, however your firm's structured, if you have an intake person, share with them the marketing stats and like get them to understand how they're impacting what like their work actually impacts. But yeah, I caution, like, don't do weekly, or don't do less than, don't do faster than weekly, but monthly is a perfect. And then exactly like the quarterly, I like the idea of the quarterly, and it's in addition to, I love the month over month. So like looking for trends, that's my big thing is I want to see trends. So often I will pull, a firm that's been around for a while, I'll pull information for 2 years and then show them a graph month by month. And I've had clients where, like, the first time we meet, I had somebody that she had, she was shifting different practice areas. And so she was shifting towards PI. So she had a couple months where, like, revenue was quadruple what it had been on a month basis. And I'm like, what happened in October? And she's like, I don't know. And I said, no, you need to, like, I don't know is not an answer. We got to figure this out. She's like, oh, I settled 3 cases and the money, like, the settlements came in, and I'm like, okay, how do we repeat that?
Yeah.
Which sometimes you can't force
Yeah.
that. I get that part, but knowing was half the battle.
Yeah.
And so then so now I'm like, okay, now that you had that big spike in revenue, let's make sure that when the money comes in, you're not blowing it on a whole bunch of shiny objects. Let's plan ahead to what we're going to spend that money on.
So what are some tools that you use, Travis, that help you kind of stay on top of all the metrics?
Obviously, CasePeer.
I didn't bribe
What
them.
client were we, Gabby? So Gabby came in and
yeah.
sold me CasePeer.
I think maybe
8
under
to 9 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
about
we were. I think
under
my firm was
25 for
12
sure.
or 13,
Yeah.
or something like that of the joint CasePeer. So we were. They started it in Irvine, right? Yeah. So we're in Costa Mesa, right next to them. So, to be honest, I'll tell you. So we were using Evernote. If anybody knows what that was. And so anytime I had a note for a case, like I talked to this client, I need my assistant to do this, I would type it out in that client's little thing on Evernote. I would print it out. I would put it in my outbox. My assistant would come and get it. Then she would write a note back if something needed to be done. And that was how we were communicating. And it was so time consuming and terrible, and things got lost. And so we met, CasePeer at a conference, and they came, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. So CasePeer, but CasePeer does a lot more than just the note taking and all that. So it's, we can attribute now where our leads are coming from. We can track it. We can know it came from this marketing source. So all of those things, we've actually made those changes in the last, year or so. And so that's really helped us know where our ROI is on all of our marketing and things like that. So, CasePeer is definitely one of them. We started this AI demand writing company as well. And so now we can track that through that. We have a dashboard through that. And so that really has changed our whole demand writing process. And so it tells us exactly how many demands are being done, who's doing them. We can collaborate, the amount of time it's done. So there's a lot of tools out there. There's way more than I just mentioned, but I think we have technology for a reason, right? Like, it can be terrible at times, but it can also make our lives a lot easier if we utilize it correctly. And so, no matter what platform you're using, right? I think most people here are using CasePeer or MyCase or one of these. But I would definitely work with the CasePeer people to find out, okay, how can I get this dialed? Because I know that they will do that with you. How can I figure out how I'm tracking these sources that are coming in? And, and so I know exactly where it is, and how do I do this? I'm sure that the onboarding team will definitely, if you're not already doing that, because we weren't for a while, we were using it for note taking and, and stuff. And I don't know if they didn't have those features back then as much either, but we've really added that, and it's made a huge difference.
Yeah, we have that solutions hub outside. So hopefully you guys can take advantage of that this afternoon if you haven't already. And talk to the team. Say, hey, I hear I'm supposed to pick 3 metrics to start measuring. What might be the metrics that you'd recommend if you are a customer of one of our solutions? So, Kelley, same question for you. And I'm wondering if you could maybe focus on some of our attorneys that are flat fee or billing by the hour. What are some of the metrics or tools that you would recommend that they use for something like that?
So when I start with any client, I start with what systems do you already have? Because I'm not trying to throw anything into the mix that, it's great to have different sources of information, or, well, I should say it this way. It's great to have a lot of information at your fingertips, but the more systems you have, now you have to figure out, are they talking to each other? Are they syncing numbers correctly? But stuff that I look at, like I have an immigration practice on MyCase. And they recently, like a year ago, had acquired another firm, and the firm was total paper, like Word documents, which just horrified me. But like their bookkeeping stuff was like on Word. I'm like, oh my God. So they had finally like rolled them in.
No shame. If
I know, yeah, sorry, no shame. Oh, I'm so bad. I just got banished. But they finally rolled this person in and all of his information. And I said, oh my gosh. So how is the firm performing? Like now you have some time with this other person and his team. Like now you guys are kind of integrated. How are things going? And, we're talking and, but it was all vibes. And I'm like that scared, I just want to run screaming. So we do a screen share on my case and I'm like, oh my gosh, I realized, because I had asked how much dollars are in your pipeline coming in. And she was like, I don't know. We have, 30 leads coming in and that we are, we're setting up appointments or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but 30 appointments, how many are those going to convert into clients and how much dollars are we talking? She's like, I don't know. So as we're doing our screen share, I'm like, oh, I see what part of the problem is. You actually can get this information right from your dashboards in my case, but you have to have the information populating, meaning when you go into your leads section, in my case, you have your little cards and there's a card per stage. So you have the name of the person, the contact person. Her intake people were not putting in a dollar amount. So, because green card is different from a visa versus, so, like each one has a different fee. And so she's like, I really honestly can't tell you how much money there is right now. And I'm like, okay, step one, go back to your intake people. And when they get a new lead, they have to quantify. And she's like, but what if it's wrong? I'm like, well, it's better than zero. So, like at least you're in a better ballpark. So just that one little change, the information is available in my case if you populate it. So just starting with the information with the systems that you already have. And then I work with clients. My go-to is usually Excel, but lately I've kind of adopted Zapier. And so they lean more on Google Sheets. So I've been trying to, because part of it, we were talking about, analysis paralysis and overload and all that. So what I try to do is what can I set up if I can't get something already in a dashboard of my CRM or whatever I'm working on, can I at least get some information, have Zapier go grab it, put it into a spreadsheet that I then can look at. Like, I don't want to have to take the time to manually go and find the information and populate spreadsheets. That sucks. So, but if I can get Zapier to do it for me, and then at least if I have raw data in a spreadsheet, I can quickly go in and just do a graph. And then now that makes it a little bit more relevant. I can understand what's happening. So supplement. So I use what you already have and then supplement with a spreadsheet where needed.
So, Travis, how do you guys at the firm balance intuition and experience with what the numbers are telling you? I think attorneys struggle with this sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. We always think we're better than we are.
Would never say that, allegedly.
No. But I think before you start tracking the data, you have a mental picture in your head of what your firm is doing, how well it's doing, how many cases we're bringing in. And it's often skewed, right? It's often wrong. And I'm not saying we shouldn't follow our intuition, like if we have, I'm a believer in that there's a gut feeling about certain things and stuff. But my personal belief is take the data, analyze it, then use your common sense and gut and intuition to make the best choice possible. Do we want to do this marketing, opportunity or this marketing opportunity? Okay, well, how has each performed in the past? What do we think, what are we forecasting for the future? And then make your best decision, right? And so I'm always of the mind that let's get the data, let's look at it, let's analyze it. And then based upon our knowledge, our, experience, the things that have happened in the past, let's then make the best decision possible. None of us know the future. None of us know what's going to happen, right? And so, I think you can only do the best you can, but having that data makes a huge difference in knowing, should we make, this choice or should we go with this opportunity?
Kelley, same question for you. How often do you run into, in your line of work, situations where data says one thing, a firm owner wants to do something else?
Yeah, I think usually the biggest question I get where something is just mind blowing, can't figure it out. I'll have somebody call me and say, hey, just got my tax return done. And my tax preparer told me I made $100,000 last year. I now owe 40 grand. And there's no way because I only have 20 grand in the bank account. So how did I make 100 grand last year? And there's no money in the bank account. And so their guts yelling at them like, this isn't right. This can't be, it's so unfair. And I get it. But that's where I'm like, we need to go back to the data, because I can pull up one report and I can show you exactly what happened. What you're seeing on your profit and loss statement is not considering how much debt you paid back, and it does not consider how many distributions, how much in distributions you took. So you're looking at this narrow view of just one report or one thing and that's why it doesn't seem right. And so you got to kind of take a step back and see, well, I need a full picture of information. Now I have more pieces to the puzzle, and now you can see what the puzzle looks like. So it's more about, I feel like sometimes maybe it's a red herring. Like you get one piece of information and you're not seeing all the other pieces of information. So it's trying to find the other pieces to put the puzzle together.
And so what are some ways that attorneys can maybe figure out where to get started with this type of thing, right? So, Kelley, not everyone maybe has access to a fractional CFO. Obviously, that's an option. What are some other ways that our audience today can start learning more about the metrics that could help drive their business?
Yeah, I first will tell you, so the reason why there's fractional CFOs, there's fractional marketing people, there's fractional professionals out there, because you're getting the experience without the high ticket dollar price. So don't just, if you're thinking, oh, well, CFOs are for publicly traded companies, no, like every firm needs to have some expert. And here's the problem. Here's where I fit in. I usually fit into teams, because somebody will have the bookkeeper and they'll have the tax preparer, but the bookkeeper doesn't have the time, and sometimes they don't really have they're so focused on data entry that they're not seeing the big picture. Like they're stuck in the forest, so they can't see what's happening. And then your tax person's like, I don't care if it has nothing to do with the IRS. I don't care. So that's where I come in to try to, like, not above them, but like in tandem to track what they're doing to try to tell you how to make decisions based on your stuff. So don't think that fractional CFO is out of reach. So definitely pursue that if you can. And surprisingly, there's a lot of bookkeeping that have a CPA that they already work with. So you might already have access to somebody, you just don't know you have access to them. But then there's other groups that you can join. Like, so I actually even started a small group where, we meet once a month just to talk about the things, because they're solo firms who are, I just don't have expertise available to me. And so, we just, each month we talk about a new topic. There's groups like mine everywhere. So, and you don't have to be local, like some are local. I think I just was talking to somebody the other day about a local group, but there's definitely resources out there. So, you will find them if you start looking for them. And honestly, like we'll go into the AI route. I love ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever you're using. Explain what your problem is. How do I find somebody to help me? And tell it, I want somebody local. I don't care if they're local. It needs to be somebody that specializes in immigration, or I don't care, so, but explain what you're looking for and it'll start to direct you where to go.
Or even just ask ChatGPT, I'm an immigration law firm and I need to start tracking 3 metrics in Q4. What metrics should I track?
Absolutely.
And we also still have a bunch of networking left in the day. So ask your peers as you guys are walking around the conference as well. Travis, what are some ways that you guys have figured out what to measure?
Trial and error and talking to people, right? We know a lot of other law firms, and ones that are very successful. And so I think we've gotten a lot of good guidance from them over the years. And then also just analyzing our business, right? Like I said, we are not financial guys, but just with a little common sense and effort, like if you just look at it and see the bigger picture, okay, what's going on? Where are we breaking down? I can tell a story. So it's, we started this AI demand writing company 3 years ago. And the reason we started it was we had a huge issue where we had grown, our marketing was crushing it. We were bringing in way more cases. We had the demand writers, but the problem was for a demand writer, it's typically a pretty low paying job. They're college grads and they're summarizing medical records all day. And that's their job. And it's not the most glamorous job. So we would train them on the medical for 6 months to a year, and then they would leave and they'd go back to, oh, yeah, lawyer looks fun. This isn't fun. Lawyer looks fun. I'm going to go to law school, or, I'm going to go do something more fun and make the same money, right? Whatever. And so they leave. And so it just, and so the demands were not that good. And so, like I said, we'd have lawyers with 20 demands on their desk because the quality suffered. And so they're like, the lawyer would think, this is going to take me a day or 4 hours to fix and make better, and get it up to par to what we, the way we want it to be to send it out. And so we had this huge bottleneck and it was crushing our revenue, and we just had money sitting there. And so we tried a couple of things that were out there at the time, didn't measure up to what we were looking for. And so we said, let's just try to build our own. And so we did. And because of that, it took, I'm not saying go build your own thing, right? But I'm just telling you an example of, like that is one thing where we have this huge problem. And so we how can we fix this? And AI, ChatGPT had just had its big moment, 100 million users or whatever in a week. And I was like, I wonder if AI could do this. And so we had some connections and we started building it. And in this last year, we have doubled the amount of demands we're sending out, and we've doubled revenue solely because of that one, just utilizing this product that we created in our firm. The demands are better. Everything has been better, right? And so the point is that you can look at it and see the big picture if you take the time and effort, and then, talk to a professional, talk to a fractional, CFO or CMO or whatever it is the issue, or talk to another attorney that you look up to. Hey, looks like you're crushing it. You're on the billboards, you're doing this, you're doing that, or whatever it is, right? You just had a huge settlement. How are you doing this issue? People that are successful want to share their secrets. Very few of them want to keep it all hidden, right? People want to tell you how they did something. And so, like she said, marketing, if you just ask, right, people will give you guidance and will help you along the way. That's been our experience. And so I think if you just take the time, right, to focus in on what's happening here, where are we dropping the ball, it can usually be fixed pretty easily.
So closing question, what is one metric that people should start tracking today if you could just track one? Kelley.
So if I could only track one, this is my new metric, my new favorite this year. I just learned about it last year. It's called lockup, which sounds really weird, but essentially, the short version of it is it's how much of your cash is locked up because you cannot get to it. So it's in number of days. It's how many days does it take you from you did work, and now how long does it take you to bill it? And then how long does it take you to collect it? So total lockup is from the day you work till the day you collect that money. Now, I know a lot of people are like, ooh, what's the industry? What's the standard? I don't care what the standard is. Do better than you did last week. Do better than you did last month. Collect faster, because you're getting work. You deserve to be paid. You deserve to be paid quickly. And so the faster that you can get the work done, billed, and collected, that's going to make a big difference in your firm. So just get your number lower. It's number of days. Get it lower as possible.
And we know from our insights in LawPay, in my case, that for firms who bill soon after the work is complete, they get paid faster because the client forgets after a couple weeks the value you've brought them. So I think if that's one follow-up I could add to that is it helps you assess where that gap is.
And why I say don't compare yourself, because your lockup is years. Yeah. Right? I mean, I'm not lying.
Yeah.
Compared to a will. Okay. Divorce, it depends if it's dissolution or, contested divorce. I mean, so don't get tied up on comparing yourself to any other firm. Just, last month, what was your days lockup? And then now what is it? And
measure your own and improve against it.
It's something you can Google. I mean, I've done podcast episodes about it, blog posts and all that. I love this topic, but if you just Google, total lockup for law firms, there will be resources that pop up on that.
What about you, Travis? One metric.
I don't think I can do one.
Okay. Lawyerly answer.
To be honest, I've really thought about this, but I think for a PI firm personally, it would be the three we started with. Cases signed up each month, demands sent out, and attorney fees brought in.
Okay.
I think those are very easy to track. And I think if you did those, for any PI firm that's out there, it's a very good starting point.
Well, and I love that it's, so like in marketing, often they'll talk about top of funnel, middle funnel, and bottom funnel. And that's what I love about this. It's the same thing. Like you're going from beginning,
Yep.
middle, and end.
Yeah.
And so
You
that's
can get a good picture.
Exactly.
You can get it's like you're not going to get the whole picture, but if you're starting, you'll get a good picture and it'll put you way ahead of where you are right now if you start with those three.
So any questions from the audience before we break? Oh, question over there. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in which problem? We've had several. So are you talking about the like creating the AI company, or are you talking about kind of 10 years ago when we started? Yeah. It came in steps, right? And so we definitely, I don't want to like be doomsdayer, but like we're still perfecting it, right? Like we're still, but we perfected it for a couple of years, and then we did another perfection, and then we did another perfection, right? And so we're constantly evolving and changing and stuff. But like I said, if you start tracking it, you will see a change in months, right? Like you really will, and you can start implementing that. And this last year, I didn't know Kelley before this, but we hired a fractional CFO, and she plugged 2 holes that, like in our marketing, we were losing a lot of money. Like my brother kind of handles the marketing, that stuff for us, but it's estimated we were losing $1 million a year. Because of leads and things that were just kind of falling through the cracks. And we fixed that. And we've added probably 25% more cases in the last 4 months, each month, coming in because those holes are plugged now. And so, like she said, I would definitely talk to Kelley, and a CFO or a fractional CFO is a great thing. If you're looking at the marketing, looking at the big picture, I think they can really help. But yeah, it's a process. Like, we all want to get there, right? Like, I want to make it. I want to get there. It's a process, right? And we're still doing it, and as you grow, new challenges arise, right? And so it's just but I think if you make those changes, like within the year, you will see a difference.
I feel like if any of you walk away from anything today, it's to start measuring something and see how you improve. Right.
No, absolutely. And just like as a follow-up, and you like started at the end, the problems that you have today. So what got you to where you are today is not going to get you to where you are going tomorrow. And so like the converse is the problems that you have today, you're going to fix those. And then you're gonna be like, oh shit, now you have a whole other set of problems, which is actually a great thing because now you have a different set of problems. You tackle those and then it propels you to the next step. So somebody that, I had a firm that, they struggled to hit a $500,000. And then before you know it, like a couple of years later, they're at like 3 million in annual revenue. And they look back and it was like, oh, I was struggling because I couldn't even find a receptionist. That was my biggest problem, in the beginning. And then now it's, how do I hire another attorney? How do I have the cash on hand to be able to bring on another associate? And how do I keep growing things? And so the problems will change. They will evolve into different problems, not necessarily worse problems, just different problems. So it's just an evolution.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, to go off that, 10 years ago, probably 80% of our new cases were referral based. Past client referrals, doctor referrals. We were doing very little marketing. And so now we spend a lot more money on marketing. And that's where this problem arose, where we weren't capturing all, we're investing a lot of money, but we were letting money go out the door because we didn't have the proper processes in place to really try to capture everything that we could out of those leads. And that's just money that you're losing, right? So, that wasn't a problem 10 years ago because we weren't spending that type of money. And
we didn't have
a
the data.
referral-based, client that comes to you, they're pretty patient, right? They'll wait for you to call because a friend or someone has said, these guys are awesome. Google leads, not so patient. They're going down the list to the next person.
They've got 10 people to call. Well, Kelley, Travis, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. I'm sure there's more questions. Please go ahead and come up and talk to us here. Or come talk to us over in the partner. We'll be there. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Hey, before you go, grab my new book, Plugging the Leaks, 10 Ways Lawyers Waste Money and Simple Fixes. It's a quick read, plain English, packed with checklists, templates, the 7 to 60-day collections escalator, and the Core 4 dashboard. So you can keep more of every dollar you earn. Now, you can order the paperback or Kindle on Amazon, or you can download it for free, the PDF format, using the link in the show notes below. Remember that profit is something you intentionally plan for in the beginning. It's not a potential bonus at the end of the year. Thanks for listening.